Kenny.
No, no.
So Naomi, guess who this is?
Different, actually.
Oh.
I'm trying to ask, me, can we bring you guys some, I'm gonna pass these out, so we're gonna have.
Hey, you're not trying to
Go get it.
Company hammer sheet.
I'm gonna take one, these are huge.
No, that's aggressive.
All right, folks. Hopefully there's enough cookies to go around there. Wow.
They're huge. They're huge.
Is it the cookie? The cookie?
I don't know how many.
Yeah, the cookies are legit. All right, folks, it is 3:01, so we do need to, this is where I need a gavel, rowdy bunch today. All right, we'll officially call this meeting to order. As always, in a work session, we'll go around the whole table and do a quick roll call just so we know who all is here as part of the discussion today. So Carly Hoover, Director of District 1.
Troy Simpson, District 3.
Hey, Lawrence, District 5.
Alex Dino, Executive Director of Local Youth Services. Naomi Berto, Director of Communications.
So Scott Whitback, Chief Academic Officer.
And Vermont, Director of Special Education.
Andrew Dodd, HR and Labor Relations.
Amy Felicia, Financial Officer.
Jeff Baker, Executive Director of CTE Data Technology Services.
Dr. Constance Berdoza, Interim Superintendent.
Or Executive Assistant.
Person behind the curtain.
Yes.
All right, so we have just two items on our agenda, but one of them will likely be a pretty lengthy discussion, really laying out our board budget priorities. So there are two documents that were attached mostly for reference. My hope is that we'll use those as for us, it's somewhat a starting place, but also kind of starting a little bit from nothing and really kind of build our budget priorities as we see, most prevalent right now in this specific time and year and budget circumstance that we are in. And then knowing that, next year we can broaden these again if we would like to. Yeah, so to have this conversation, we're gonna kind of, and obviously a lot of times at a work session, there's a lot of work that y'all are doing to present to us. But I think my hope is that kind of y'all's role might be to help us clarify, or if we have a question about how something might be implemented, some questions around that I think could be really useful. Or if as we're kind of talking, I think the point of wanting to get some really more specific budget priorities is just that you don't have 30 to work from. And so if there are clarifying ways that we could word something that would really help you in your work, either whether it's making it more broad, more specific, I would value that input as well from the whole team. I feel really awkward that I can't see any of you all. So I'm gonna just turn. Yeah. Just gonna do it. All right.
Guess I just want to make one, so this is the last page, I guess, the first page. The thing about this, the old board priorities, it was based on the old strategic plan. And so for me, the first thing is to lay out the structure of the new strategic plan, not the old one. And then we can put things under that. But I just want people to understand these titles create a culture of equity. I mean, the attempt at this time was to group things under the old strategic plan topics rather than the new strategic plan. So the first thing is to, use the new strategic plan and then put things under that. So just to understand the history of this document.
So, thank you. That's definitely helpful. I think for me, and I'm obviously curious about everyone's thoughts. I totally can see the benefits to tying our budget priorities to the strategic plan, and I think we could definitely go that route. I'm wondering though if we use the strategic plan as the starting place versus thinking about where we're at our budgetary status right now as a starting place, and then make the connections to strategic plan where it seems relevant. you know, I mean, I mean, I understand, obviously, like strategic plan is our guiding, kind of our guiding light. I don't know.
It's our guiding document, right? So I guess, well, there's like one thing that's not in there, for example, like the big thing that comes up is safety, right? Safety of students and staff is the highest priority. Safety, so relationships, social emotional, that's part of the strategic plan, but physical safety is not. So I think it's important that we list that, but there's other things I think that if we believe that something is necessary, then we need to make sure it's in there as well, because students need to come to school feeling physically safe, emotionally safe, and they need to feel a sense of belonging, right? All of that, and what does that look and feel like in order even to access education? It is
Yeah,
true.
the only thing I want to be careful we don't do is start doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been very careful about when you present things to us.
Yeah.
You put it in the context. of it.
Right.
And if we start doing this.
Yes,
Then we're gonna lose focus really fast. So
Yes.
I just would be, I'm recognizing that there may be some things that we need to do that don't fit nicely, but be very careful about that.
That by putting something in our budget priorities, we're not asking for more than what's, or something different from what's.
Well, yeah, that's gonna send us off in some other direction, because we've had trouble over the years.
Yeah.
When you start having, you know, the board has superintendent evaluations and strategic plan and work priority, and if those things start
Yeah.
veering away from each other, then we lose focus, which
Yeah.
is one of our problems that we've had around here, is losing focus. That's,
No, just a blank document, and then sharing it here. Okay, so maybe let's just kind of do this. Let's think about, sorry, normally I'm like, oh, my facilitator hat, I could have brought chart paper and we could have done all these things. I didn't do that.
but there's a
So,
whiteboard behind you. The same. I don't know if there's a 10 there.
okay, sure, cool. All right, so let's just kind of think like big bucket. What are where should our money go? What's our big priorities? Big bucket, then we can dive a little bit more deeply.
You grab one of yours.
Are we talking about big bucket like priority lists as far as like the different programs, or what are you asking?
I'm thinking about kind of high level, when we think about how we spend our money, where we spend our money, what are our top priorities? Like, I think it came up yesterday in our conversation that obviously the instruction, right? Educational instruction is a priority. So, and then my thought is from there, we would say, okay, well, what about that do we want to prioritize? But like kind of just starting with that. That's terrible, right? What else?
Staff and student safety.
What else?
Facilities. Technology.
Are those the same, or are you thinking
No,
about two different?
sure.
Okay,
They overlap, of course.
sure.
another big one is, you know, different people talk co-curricular, extracurricular activities. Losing all those.
And that's different from this.
Can be.
I'm seeing, yeah, from the team.
Yeah.
It's in Richmond.
Okay,
Enrichment.
But it's also extended learning. There's two. So there's
I
extended
will
learning
branch
and
it
then
off
there's
from the
enrichment.
top. Yeah, I will branch it off from
Okay.
the top.
I think that makes sense because it's still learning.
Yeah.
Just a different way of.
So would academic support services fall up under the educational services?
With, if it's embedded,
Enrichment, that's it.
it's embedded during the day, services are part of the educational instruction. But when we think of like after-school programs, like for example, the YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, after-school like camps,
I'm talking about IAs and all
Yeah,
that other stuff.
then that would be
They're all
under-
covered over this.
yeah. I would call that probably services. You could put a bucket under student
Well,
services.
that's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
Unless it's already.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think. When I
It's
think,
mental health.
Yeah.
counselors and all that.
Yeah,
stuff.
that's under services.
Okay, that's in that fund. Many of these have umbrellas that have things on.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think my hope is that we'll kind of whittle further and further down, right? So if we've got these bigger buckets, and then we think about, okay, enrichment and then student services, okay, what within student services are we really wanting to ensure that we're prioritizing, right? And again, we could think about leaning into what our strategic plan says, we could lean into the fact that, you know, we're really trying to focus in on our Black youth, right? So who, right, and what are those things that then might fall under that we want to prioritize? Because again, obviously, it's hard to do this, right? Because everything is valuable and everything is a priority. And at the same time, we have to be able to identify how and what we prioritize to ensure that we can right-size our financial ship. What else?
Does sports and after-school clubs go under one of these umbrellas or something?
Is that an enrichment?
Yeah.
Is that enrichment?
And to me, that's athletics, it's the arts, it's clubs, it's, you know, all those things that, for me, are really important, particularly now because of COVID, but, you know, getting students back together and functioning as social units again.
But yeah, so is that already in enrichment? Is that an umbrella of that, or is that?
So it is, but since that's come up, I'm gonna put, you know, collaborative group, what would be the kind of best way to describe, like the clubs?
Clubs and athletics.
I would probably just, you know, list the things. It's athletics, it's the arts programs, it's the clubs, yeah, music, theater, all those.
All the things that aren't funded
All the things
that-
that aren't funded. What
They're funded in
in other ways,
marginal,
yeah,
yeah, a variety of,
not directly.
I mean, they're supposed to be funded by the enrichment levy, but the enrichment levy is all gone for other things.
And what about under staff and student safety? Let's just shift there for a second.
So are you separating out to you know, like physical safety and mental, or both? Yeah, because I mean, there's things under facilities, like, you know, the physical safety of the buildings. You know, and under that is the things like ventilation systems, lead in the water, you know, security, you know, physical security of the, you know, and lockdowns and drills and all those things that are.
So curiosity I have about that is, obviously, we're talking about the full budget, which includes like the capital projects money, right, the capital projects budget. And would there be a better way for us to really focus and say, we know that this capital projects funding is there to support some of these things, but when we think about our board priorities for the budget spending as a whole right now, would it be better to think about some of the other buckets of budgets? Does that question make sense?
Because the money you're really looking at is PPA, right?
Right.
Well, except that there's now, because we're having to borrow from the capital projects to keep the other one going, the two kind of
Intertwined too much.
intermingle with each other. So we have, I mean, the more borrowing we have to do, I mean, I think binding conditions is gonna put some risk blocks on
Yes.
how much of that kind of stuff we can actually do for very long, but. Yeah, so they're all.
When you think about technology, you mentioned this one. Do you see technology as a separate component from the technology supports for educational instruction?
I think that was part of my original inquiry. I'm not sure. But I was listening to, thinking of a couple of meetings ago, we were talking about some of the already contracts we have out there for different upgrades? Is that in the building? Is that, does it come out of the building? Does it come out of construction? What does that look like? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
All right, man.
So tech levy pays for like, just about 100% of the technology that happens in our PPA classrooms. CT also pays for technology that goes into SUT classrooms.
Yeah.
So that's primarily where the technology money comes from, is tech levy.
So I think then the question becomes, is the tech levy
In this budget.
meeting our technology needs? Or do we feel like we need to prioritize additional spending on technology?
So if the levy passes tonight, we're gonna get two pots.
When the levy passes
When the levy
tonight.
passes tonight, I don't wanna get ahead of myself, but when the levy passes tonight, there's gonna be two pots of money. There's gonna be capital projects money attached to the tech and the tech levy. That money is split different ways based on need, is the way it was done in the past. I think at this point, I disagree with me if you want, but I think the capital projects is something that needs a little bit more attention than technology at this point, and I'm coming from the technology point of view. But that's all for aiming and all of the stuff. But that's basically where this money comes from.
And so when you think kind of about our technology plan and kind of the things that you have on the horizon and the things that we're really trying to implement to ensure that our technology is up to date and meeting the needs of our students, do you feel like the tech levy is going to support that? Or do you feel like it's worth us thinking about other spending and prioritizing that within other spending?
The technology levy may go up, the cost associated with it might go up a little bit because salaries increase.
Mhm.
But in terms of, we're on pretty much a 4-year cycle with Chromebooks, with staff laptops, with everything that's consumable. And it's worked out really well.
Okay, so
But there are limits on, the tech levy cannot just be used for anything. I mean, all
Right, oh,
these
yeah,
pots of
right,
money
right,
have
right.
have limits around, so you can't just say, okay, tech levy, receiver print, let's just move bunch of that. I mean, we've already done that, frankly, moved a bunch of that up to BEA.
Yeah.
So we just have to be cognizant, there's not unlimited amount of moving we can do, we can do some, but
for sure, I think what I was trying to check for is, because again, if we're thinking about, and I'm not trying to minimize the fact that we have to think about the priorities of spending for the tech levy and the capital operations levy. And also, if we're thinking about how we're developing a budget for our BEA funds, do we need to prioritize technology as a piece of that? Or do we feel like what the tech levy is going to bring in is going to support the majority of our technology needs?
I get you. So the question is, because we've got finite, so we have to prioritize.
Yes,
Either, and I'm just gonna answer your question, correct? Is the technology levy sufficient enough, or are we willing to make it sufficient enough so we can prioritize other stuff?
yes.
It may not be enough to do what we want, but do we have other priorities that forces us to say, we're only gonna do what we can in technology with this, so we can prioritize that?
Exactly.
and so what I heard Jeff saying was, generally speaking, technology is in a pretty good place right now.
Yeah.
So we can think
We'll
about,
Take that off,
well.
or low priority though.
Well, because it would definitely be a lower priority in thinking about the budget priorities again of our general spending budget. And if I'm using totally the wrong terms, I'm sorry. Again, not to say that there might not be things that come along that lead to this, but when we're thinking about like the long list of priorities and where that might be, it's probably lower because again, the tech levy is supporting at least our general technology needs enough for this year and probably next year, because it's in the past. That it maybe doesn't need to be a really focal point of, we're gonna dig our heels in about this thing, right? To make sure that we have the money here to support this
I
thing.
think that's probably true, subject to, we can't, don't start digging in too much, pulling out of it, but in terms of priorities, yeah.
Yeah, because I really want us to be really narrow focused as much as possible, which I know it's hard because there's so many things, right? But, you know, I think it's gonna help us as we're really leaning in to all of the budget conversations, leaning into the challenges that the changes that we have to make temporarily in our district, right? I want to make it as easy as possible for the team and also easy for us to be able to talk about, yeah, here's why we're making those decisions, because we've prioritized these 4 things. Or whatever.
And accept also that technology may be an answer under the instructional education instruction.
Could be, for
There
sure.
may be ways of improving our efficiency and effectiveness through the use of technology to deliver great instruction.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
Yes.
but yeah.
I'm doing my best here. I don't know. What thoughts do y'all have about staff and student safety? And I think we can talk about maybe physical safety outside of the facilities themselves, perhaps. Is that possible?
I will respond, and so it's officially on the record. It has been made clear to us that it's a priority to the students,
Safety, yes.
physical, on site and off.
And of course, physical leads over, if they don't feel physically safe, then their
That's
mental,
emotional, yeah.
yeah, exactly.
So talk about some of the components that make up physical safety. I think in the context of safeties and school conversations, an SRO could be.
But that's in there.
Or security staff,
Security
however,
staff.
yeah, I mean, there's a variety, I mean, we have some full-time security staff.
We have 3
Sorry.
separate.
I know we're talking budget, but as an advocate for what was shared to me for the students, that they feel that the system's in place to keep them safe. Like whether they see the SRO or the security, they know that someone's not gonna run to the school and beat up the principal. Like there's something in place there's, so I don't know how that in context of budget. But
Well, it makes a difference, right? Because if we need more security visible in the schools, that is going to impact our budget, right? Because that's another person then that we have to.
But an SRO doesn't cost us anything, right?
No, it does.
What does it cost?
That piece I don't know, but I believe there is a cost to having an SRO usually.
I was told it was a cost, but the PD department has the resources for it.
Full police department, so it's.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Well,
It's not
they
in our
have,
budget.
they have absorbed the cost, but
That's what the
they said,
chief told me.
but they said they don't have money
person.
now to do that.
They actually, so I can clarify that, because I'll look at the MOU, I have, maybe I'll send the MOU to everybody again, we should send it to everyone again, just to dust it off. I'll go back and look, but I do know that in the past, yes, there was no cost to the community. I also know that they did not budget anything for this year, so if, like, for example, if we decided to implement it this year, there's no way that we would even have budget or staffing until the following 24-25 year by either parties, so nothing is gonna happen. So if people are feeling that that's something that needs to happen now, well, for example, we vote, and it's not gonna happen
That ship is on
physically.
its sail.
Yeah, it's not gonna happen until 24-25.
But we need to move on it if we're gonna do it.
Yeah, for
If we're
sure.
gonna do it.
Although
For
I
sure,
have
for
to-
sure. Yeah.
But I think that's with a lot of the budget stuff.
Correct,
Budget for this year's already.
toast. Yeah. I agree.
So the
I
other
do
part
have a
is-
question. If we move to RIF, does that start this year or next year?
Okay, sorry, share. Wait, say again?
The process starts this
Yeah.
year
But.
before the timeline, but it would be for 24-25.
So all of this checks.
All of this is for 24-25 because what happens is last spring, like June, was the first round when budgets and all of that work, that pre-work. So we have deadlines with the CBA, right? Our bargaining units, which is actually before June 30th. All of that happens and commences before June 30th. of the end of the year. So whatever planned for budgets or focus points are already cemented in those. And then those staffings are hired. And if there's contractors, all of those pieces are done. I think what needs to happen moving forward, which has not been typical here, is we need to start doing, I would love to do it checks and balance, because October 1 is when we do our enrollment counts officially. In the past, Xloa hasn't, at least in the last few years, especially during COVID, they haven't really used that as a marker to reduce at that point in time. And that's something that I think we need to consider to add in there, is if our enrollment numbers don't show up, which is harder to do after the fact, but that's something that we have to consider, because then we're not staffing outside of what our enrollment numbers are, right? And so, but all of those, there's a couple checks and balances, and then those staffing pieces get locked in. Especially tricky with special education staffing, because if you have the student number of students with IEPs, you have to, legally, we are obligated to fund services for those students. So there's a couple nuances in that, but so we're trying to figure out how do we build a new system where if we need to pull staffing back in October, we can, which is going to be new for the system. It's not, hasn't been done before.
And some staffing you can pull back, some staffing you can't.
And some staffing could
You have
increase.
certificated staff, contracts you can't.
Yeah.
Classified, administrative you can't,
Right, it could be, and it, yes, depending on the contracts. that we
depending
have.
on the
Yeah,
contract.
the
right?
contract that we have, and also, for example, and you could expect, so for example, if we have a decrease of enrollment, but an increase of special education staffing, then what you might be neutral on paper, but it's not, it's tricky, it's
Right.
super tricky. So that, yeah, so everything we're talking about is for 24, 25 and beyond.
And some of the budget priorities are just talking about 2024.
Yeah.
With the opportunity to say, oh, great, going into the next budget cycle, we're doing great on our plan. We know that we're going to be out of binding conditions, then we can broaden our priorities again. Another thing I was thinking as you were kind of talking, like, I think it's important to name and recognize, and I kind of did, but just want to say it again, that like, it's a hard conversation to have, right? When we're thinking about what we say and verbalize that we're prioritizing. It doesn't mean that other things, again, are not important or are not valuable. It just means these are the things we really need to lean into right now to build our capacity differently. So I'm thinking about this. An example is, first off, I'm never a firm believer that we should never cut anything, arts, clubs, all of those things. And know that if it's not a board budget priority, it can still be a board priority, right? So if it's not a budget priority, we can still say, but this is a board priority, so go find whatever resources you need to make that happen, right? Whether that's a partnership with so-and-so or other funding sources that might could help support that thing. So we've got two opportunities to really say, these are our priorities for the board. One is budget, one is kind of more overall. That helps.
Yeah, I don't know, if you're separating out, our general fund budget and then other grant opportunities. Those grants come into the general fund, right? So, I mean, they're kind of all the same. So you're talking about differentiating between the source of the money as opposed to the actual budget that we have to work with.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean.
Or maybe not, because I guess, like, if we think about what we, like, the grants that we are working within right now and our BEA fund, so like all of the things that we have that we know that we're gonna have the funding sources for already in 2024, it doesn't mean that we can't say, we'd really like to find an organization and a grant that can then help support those things that we don't see us able to do within what we have going into the 2024 budget.
So it's almost a we want something like this to happen as long as you can obtain the resources
Yes,
to make it happen.
yes.
Yeah, for example, I would put in that category, the outdoor education camp, which, you know, we know there's dollars out there.
Yeah.
That can be obtained.
And again, it's hard to even like for the words to come out of my mouth. The idea of having to take a pause on our amazing music programs, right? Particularly because I think it all comes back to this. But
Right.
Well, and to me, it comes, you know, a lot of those extracurricular programs are so important coming back from COVID, recovery of COVID, because students have been taken away from that. Their mental health is in jeopardy, and putting it back into all those programs. And I know, I mean, for a fact, there's lots of students over there that, you know, their main reason for coming to school is a lot of times either athletics or music or those programs that keeps them. So when we're talking about the instruction, in order for them to get to the instruction, you know,
That's
they
important.
need those other things, because otherwise.
Oh, I'm just saying, it's a board priority, right? So the priority in my mind, and we're all there, is to get it back on budget, right? That's our number one
Yep.
priority. And therefore, the umbrella, everything goes underneath. So what I need to better understand is where, because I hear money's here, money's there, we can get creative with different things. So what we're hoping to do is figure out what us as a board and the school district wants to prioritize and keep, if we can, under the constraints of the money that we're in, the staffing that, you know, we're gonna have to deal with at the time, right?
yes,
And so, is there any, like, because I like, for example, the ad vote. That's a big cost that's gonna be going with that, but I need to know, is that something that we're gonna sit here and, you know, take away it, or,
so are we going program by program in this conversation? No. What we're doing is we're setting the container with which then they do that. The team does that, right? So if we say leadership development programs, particularly that are supportive for our students of color, if that is a priority for us, then it's their job to say, these are the programs that support that. These are the programs that they don't, or that aren't fully aligned with that priority, and then make the decisions about what needs to be on pause and what can we continue funding right now.
See, I'm a little not totally buying into that. There are certain programs that, you know, over the years, our community has supported, our students have supported, that I think are, you know, so valuable that I would probably vote against a budget if certain things were cut, because I know the value of them to our students and families. So I'm not willing to just be totally wide open and say, no, I'm not gonna talk about any programs that we have, like Avid is one of them. You know, I've seen over and over, our students are just, you know, that's a hugely valuable program. So if anybody decided to cut that, you know, I would probably vote against it.
And that
Just
makes
on
sense.
Just
Yeah,
on that alone.
for
So-
sure. I think it's that, because we asked, right? And it's a work in progress, but I don't even think you have a list of these are all of the things that we're currently doing in Tukwila. And here's all of the budget implications of all those. Like we don't have that in front of us right now. So we can't have, and plus we probably don't have the time to go program by program by program and talk about that. That doesn't mean that when a budget is presented, or we're not going to be brought back into the conversation before those specific budget decisions are made, to say, this is what we're looking at. These are the things that we're thinking that will help us get back in line with our budget. And this is the impact on the specific programs. And then we can say, no, right? And shift, redirect what the hope is.
But can I add one thing? So we're working on that list. So we're working on a programmatic list, a staffing list, we have pages of that, because we have to look at pets well over in the millions of dollars. It's, you know, you were the one that said, wait a minute, it's this much million. So we are working on that list. We're finalizing it. But we also have had conversations. We've heard you. Like, I'm just saying, we listen, we take notes. So we know EBIT is important, right? We know that, right? We know, for example, the Urban League is important. There are certain things that we've heard over and over again. So we've taken into those considerations, right? We know Belong Partners is another value added to the system. So we're looking at not necessarily certain things that benefit students, especially our students according to our values, because we've set our values and we've set our strategic plan. But the big shift for us, because so much of our budget is staffing, right? That's the thing that we have to really start talking about, because when we talk about classified staff, for example, as an example, a lot of them do direct service to students, right? And they're all in different pockets of dollars, right? What we're talking about is not the classified staff and title dollars and not the classified staff and special education dollars. We're talking about that general fund, right? Because that is exactly where we're not getting reimbursed by the state. That's a huge cost to the system. So what I need to hear is, so what is the biggest priority around that, for example? And do we feel it's in our elementary schools? Do we feel it's our K-1, it's our newcomers? Like, what is it, our McKinney-Vento students? So we're in relation to that. So we're looking at those kinds of guidance because it is about for us, the general fund, right? And if somebody here says, for example, Avid I've heard Avid, like for an example, and Avid is currently funded in ESSER, then we've got to figure out how to put it back in. And to be honest, the amount to spend on Avid isn't that much, but when you add it all up, right? So we have to make sure that we prioritize it, and then the question is, then what gets stopped in the meantime or significantly reduced? So that's one thing we're looking at right now. For example, Belong Partners. I'll give an example because I know the money off the top of my head, because when I saw it, I was like, whoa, it's $165,000 for them to work with all 5 of our schools, as an example, and it's completely funded out of ESSER. So they are a program that works on, they have elements of disproportionate discipline, they have look at data, they teach de-escalation training, they have discipline support, they do tracking with data around, they do a lot of things to support staff. And we've seen them in action. I mean, I've been in the Cascade View when they were doing a training, Scott's been in a building when they've been in training. It's good work, and it's based on sound discipline and the research base, it's good work. But we don't have $165,000 to fund them completely, right? So we're actually now negotiating with them so what can be scaled down in terms of continuing the professional development, but at a lesser amount, so that we can maintain the relationship over the next 2 years, and then we're in a healthier place, we can build it back up. We don't want to, so some of these key partnerships, we're looking at what does work, and it's all aligned to the strategic plan as well, right? It's actually, they have a couple data points in there that we have to look at for that. But that's what we're looking at too, is what are we scaling back? But there are things that we've been doing for a long time that we've just done for a long time, and we don't have the data to support that it's actually working for our kids. So we're looking at that too. So that's an example of that. So I guess you will get the list eventually of the programming, but it's all about, we want to make sure that we finalize it. And we do want to hear, for example, if people here say, these programs focus on our Black and brown kids or focus on our most vulnerable kids in our system for our students over everything else, then that is something, most of those are ESSER funded. So that tells us information. So when we're looking at our data, because what we want to present to you is something that's close. I don't, because what happens is we can be in here, we're rejecting the budget. My goal is to get something in front of you as close to to the values of what you've already stated that you want. Right, that's my goal.
I mean, if we're looking for kind of philosophical statements, if you go through that particular document, that was created actually quite a number of years ago back, the last time we did kind of major cuts in the system. And that's more at the philosophical level, things like reduction of areas with less impact on students who are not studying English. That's the focus on the MLL students. Analysis of ineffective programs. I mean, I know there's a whole process you're going through to look effectiveness and efficiency of all programs. And so there's a whole bunch of things we could talk about there, but that gets down into but I mean, these are So we want to make sure that basically our most vulnerable students, are not impacted. I mean, impacted to the absolute minimum we can, which is kind of the basis of this whole document. And it's also looking for, going back evidence-based, looking for things that work, things that are working, don't stop doing them, maybe scale back and come back up. Things aren't working, then stop those. I mean, so if you're looking for this philosophical basis, I think this is a good document. Sorry, just philosophical things. I mean, subject to, we have to meet all the legal requirements, of course. Engage students, human needs must be met before their highest academic potential, like it's all the social emotional stuff. Those are all, so these are more philosophical statements. That hopefully, I think most of them are still valid.
I think for me, what I'd like to know is what's the most out of all of these? No, really.
Yeah,
What is for me, if you're gonna take these first, are these the right priorities? One. And then what rises to the top is your things that you think, no matter, like what you just said, I will vote the budget down. I need to hear that. Like if you're saying extended programming for kids of color specifically, or touching the arts, we need to hear that. That's what we need to, because we're still finite, finessing, and we're working with our HR, our labor groups to get their priorities. So for example, if they say, I'm just gonna pull something out here, like a SEL teacher, I'm gonna say that because that's come up a lot in a lot of meetings, or a behavioral tech, right? Person, that's what we said in a staff meeting, behavioral technicians, we don't wanna lose those. So then again, then we need to know that, right, those priorities, so that we can elevate what are those staffing priorities, what are those programmatic priorities? Because when we go back and I present some budget to you, I wanna make sure that it's as close to the values that everyone's saying that they want. But that means we have to eliminate or pause other things.
right.
Yeah, which is hard.
I mean, in general, I think probably all can agree that, students kind of social emotional well-being
Yes,
is the foundation. So if we start ripping that out, then the academics is gonna be irrelevant because they're not gonna be able to get there.
Or if I may chime in,
Yeah, go ahead.
recognize other things that may be practical to pause or remove. But understand that they may have impact on that.
Yeah.
And maybe not on the line item, but on the efficacy of the impact on the target. And then I don't know that necessarily always shows up here. So those are conversations we need feedback on. Because I think one of them talks about that our students achieve their highest best. Well, from impact, the AVID program does that. So is there a way to get that same result in a cost efficient way? And not saying, I just use that as an
Yes.
example. So it's not necessarily getting rid of AVID. How do we get them to their achieve in a way that helps us get this budget thing around? Those are difficult conversations. We're in this room, we can say they're difficult, so let's not pretend they're all gonna be easy. But if the students' safety, well-being, and academic goals are our priority, then we need to look at even the custodial stuff. If it impacts those adversely, we need to navigate that. And I think, because these are not core priorities and they're not necessarily prioritized wrong. I think we also have to be wise enough to read what's not there and see how it ripple effect. And so please consider that as you present to us. Because, I mean, let's use the same example we keep throwing around happening. The staff have been trained it. So not only would you save a few $100,000 cutting it, but you've wasted the money you trained them on. I should say wasted, it's not the best use of it. So sometimes you might have to consider, instead of being a silo program for Select, implementing its efficacy across the board, it'd be the biggest bang for your dollar. I mean, you had to have some creative ideas, but again, I just don't want that lost in the shuffle. There could be some no-brainers that may have unintended consequences that affect what we deem as a higher priority. Have to be wise enough to understand.
And I don't know how much, excess. I mean, we've talked a lot about like the class sizes, at the secondary level. That's, I mean, there's all kinds of things tied up in that.
Yeah.
Particularly, Dennis and Alex aren't here, but they will talk about the need for the higher level classes. And some of those are the ones that have the fewest number of students in there. So we have to, can we be clever enough to figure out other ways to do that? I don't know, but and some of those probably will take more than 1 year to do. And so, yeah, all this stuff is intertwined, but,
Do we, pardon me, I'm new, but do we have is there a hard cap on class size now in place, HR or? And what is that?
The CBA outlines all of those.
And what is it? You right now?
Yeah, so kindergarten and first grade is 22 students, third, second and third is 24 students, fourth and fifth is 27, and it's 30 students. That's on 6.
Thank you.
Yes. And to answer your question about, is it a hard cap? Not necessarily, because there's a remedy in place if the class roster exceeds the number of students.
then they need it possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
But don't we staff. the
Maybe
boys,
what,
I like-
pay the teacher more?
The teacher's compensation
That's
for-
reduction.
Put 1.5.
But our K2 are staffed on, those guy has a reduction, an early learning reduction that in order to benefit from, you have to keep numbers at a certain ratio. So we do that.
So I'm thinking of ripple effect, like you cut staff, classes get bigger.
Yeah.
Then it costs you more if it goes,
If we
It's
exceed,
like-
yeah.
Yeah, rock that hard place, yeah. You were asking about, I didn't really thought that the grade levels, elementary.
Yeah.
So after years of watching this whole system, for me, I would put resources elementary because that's the growth, that's where they come from. I mean, a lot of, I think the issues that we've seen, particularly with MLL students, the source of it is down in the elementary grade. So that's the foundation. So I don't know, I like the idea of these foundational concepts of, the social emotional foundation and the early grades foundation. So I don't know if that's a philosophy that you can work
That is
with.
something, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean,
And I
that's,
guess in hearing if that's what the board thinks as
Yeah.
well, right?
I think it's, I think it's important to be intentional.
Yep.
Not to dismiss my high school junior now. But we're thinking long term. We really have to prioritize that 1 through 4.
Yep.
Because it'll change what you have to spend, 8 to 12. Even as I think, we were just discussing, talking about extras outside services for blacks and browns, and if we do that before they get to the 4th grade, won't cost as much, 9 to 12. So I think, I don't know if I'm willing to build the flag in as the priority, but I think it ought to be considered, particularly move forward, like Sid was saying. But down the line, it'll, I don't say it's cost us less, but the efficacy of those dollars spent.
yeah, there is that long, the same thing, if you start, school districts typically, when they get getting crunches, and we've seen that around, they start ripping the arts out and they start ripping, the extracurriculars out. And I just think that's a really short-sighted thing to do because it rips at the structure of the student's social emotional well-being. And if you do that, it's years to recover from some of that kind of stuff. Our students are already trying to recover from COVID, which is a huge impact, and we really got to be careful to much as possible, not pull, I mean, when I talk about this with the state people, I say, look at, you fund a system like that, you're just pulling the rug out from under our kids, which is a horrible thing to do. So we, we're gonna have to figure out how to balance that.
But I think, I just want to reiterate, I think down here 1560. Getting us to zero or healthy is a priority.
Yes.
So I don't want to dismiss it.
Yeah.
And I think it's knee-jerk and cowardly to just pull the arts out, because it's out of lack of understanding of how that helps the student be more confident in the other areas that challenge them.
And also, as you said, Dr. Bergosa, also, the other kind of no-brainer approach is, 5% cuts across the board. I think that's a horrible approach.
It's a horrible
You
approach.
agree?
And I agree.
We need to,
Yeah.
there's some places, I mean, we need, one of my things is the whole effectiveness and efficiency of the whole system, and that's what you're doing, running through the whole system. So some places maybe run super efficiently and some are not,
Yeah.
and so we need to be intelligent about how we're, where we're cutting, not just this brain.
Yeah, we have some departments currently that are understaffed right now.
Yeah,
Right, like security. Every time I go to security or talk to maintenance, I mean, they've got people out, they're on leave, they're on this, I mean, they're very sorely, and as you know, with all the maintenance things that are happening right now, that is an area we actually cannot touch right now, so, we
And
can't.
it's a priority, but it's understaffed, so how does that math?
Yeah, so we have to make sure, but we still have to pay those staff members, right, that are not here, right? So we don't have the money to do extra substitutes and things like that. But we need to get to zero so that we can have the money to do that. That's the goal, is to get to zero, so then we can have mitigation funds. So for example, my goal is to figure out how to right size everything so that when by next year, this is what I would like, that when we get to October 1, we look at enrollment very closely, make our adjustments, and then also have our resources and reserves in place. Because let's say a student moves in from another country with a severe disability, right? And we have or more, and we have a need, or a whole group of community members, students move in from another area of town or another district that they also pose and they need some significant needs, right? We need to be able to staff the staff to support that classroom, and we need to be able to mitigate whatever they need in the meantime. And so when we get funded in October, that's it. Right, that's it, right? There's some adjustments made along the way, but that's the marker that we use to keep going. And so we have to make sure that we have some funding there, the reserves to support whatever comes to us after October, right? That's the goal. And right now, we're in a place right now where we're having to say a lot of no, right? Because we already did a lot of that, but it keeps surfacing. We're doing what we can, but some of the big asks, and we know there's a need, but we're looking at alternative ways and reallocating resources differently. It'd be better if we can actually be really thoughtful and be responsive when it's student need driven.
So one of the things I think I'm hearing, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this, I think I have a decent pulse from those two. That one of our priorities is the emotional and mental well-being of our students, specifically when we're thinking about the ways in which they engage with the school community outside of the classroom. In service, of course, to ultimately their educational instruction, but
I mean, I can get on board with that, for sure. I think it's difficult for me to gather. You guys are very good at philosophizing and doing different things and trying to determine. It's easier for me, the way that I work is, we're gonna end at this. This is what we have. This is our general fund that we can get that will keep us in the green moving forward. This is all we have. What do we do with this amount? That's always kind of more cut and dry for me, because I like a lot of the athletics. I don't want, if that goes away, I'll just not vote for the, I'll not vote for it, or whatever that's there, so I guess it's just, I need to see the brass tacks,
Got it.
you know, to where we're at. Because, and secondly, I want to hear from the principals. If, you know, if that, or if I have to go to their school or if it's something that they say, we can't function without this program in some form or fashion. Those are the people that are doing it, right? I mean, I'm sure you guys are in the classrooms and different stuff, but we're also admin, you know, here, I'm assuming. So I want to hear from the people that are living and breathing it 40 hours, 60 hours, 80 hours a week. You know, if that's what we're going to, because we're talking about major cuts to programs and students. They know their kids better than I know their kids, and any of us do. They're with them every single day.
So Erin, can you talk a little bit about the work we're doing with the school leaders and the work we're doing with the unions and the work can you just share a little bit just what we're doing?
Next session.
Just, yeah, some of those pieces, yeah.
Yeah, so just thinking of the investment process is that we are spending some time collecting I think some feedback from school leaders that it's going to be very helpful. It's due at the end of this week. And that information, I think is targeting different areas of what the district and the association will be potentially bargaining. And I think that will help us understand the priorities a lot clearer. After we do this electronic survey, then the district's collective bargaining team is going to sit with 4 to 5 individuals, including the building leaders and assistant principals, and hear specifically their responses to potentially six questions that are very targeted based on their data. And I think that, again, that will help inform the conversations that we're also having about where the reductions take place for stabilization going forward. And so it's very intentional work. It's and then we've got the request out to the association president to hear what prioritization data they collected, because they have held similar sessions with their membership as far as what are the priorities, what are the needs, what are the interests, what are the positions that are necessary, and we're asking for that information.
So, and this is just my struggle. I'm gonna have to take it down to my level because that's where I'm at, right? I'm not with you guys at been. Charlie Simpson, the parent in there. What are my priorities for my kids? You teach them, they're safe, they come back home, and then everything else on top of that is nice, right? That's Charlie Simpson's priorities, okay? That's on there. So what does that look like? You know, in there, and as far as budget wise and everything else, you know, that for me, I'm thinking Charlie Simpson parent here is for you guys to figure out, right? To manage the money that you've been given, the levies that are gonna be there, and then follow through with the basics that I'm asking. And then from there, so it would be helpful, right? If you're asking now Charlie Simpson, the board member, to have already had those come up here, from the principals, have those things already here in front of me. I can't conceptualize what somebody who's doing the work every single day and try to speak for them at that point. You can't do it. You know what I mean? And yes, and like when you said listening sessions, see, all this is new terminology. So you have different things. I just want someone to come and just give it to me. You know what I mean? And just let me know where it's at. Next thing, I think, Charlie, the business owner, if I'm behind on payments, right, or we're doing stuff, I'm gonna ask him this question is, do we have late fees, or are we getting charged late fees that are out there on anything?
Depends on the vendor,
So
so.
just yes or no, I guess. So do we have some fees that are out there or bills that are gonna come up with late fees? So I'm also, and the practical part is, we need to pay those so that we're not paying late fees, because late fees always get you later, right? And so then a budget priority, it's hard to conceptualize all of this and then stick it on a board for me. So I guess that's where I'm coming from.
Can I see your pen,
Oh, please, you
Director?
can erase all that.
No, I'm gonna leave it there. Should have got another glasses. I'm with Charlie. Cause this would take us a long time. My brother gave me power to just, let's get to where I'm at. Here's the pie. This is a dollar amount we're gonna have to work with next time. Superintendent. Fee. Principal. We need to prioritize how that pie is gonna be split. My recognize we're already in a deficit. So all of our philosophical aspirations still gotta come down to slicing this pie. Charlie, father, businessman. I, father, grandfather, church pastor. I would like to get us to a point where this number of what it costs to do what we do dictates the pie, but we're not there. I'd like to get us to here so we can have an accurate awareness of what it takes to do what we do. And then resources, but that's not where we are. This is where we are. And I hear Charlie saying, I can't decide this. I can tell you what's important. If this is the base dollar amount for 24, 25, 27, moving forward, let's look at how we need to slice this pie to get to healthy, to get to good, to get to great, to get to excellent. We can throw some stuff up there, but I don't think it would be. I don't want to use the word fair. It wouldn't be appropriate. I'd rather get the input. And then we gotta make some hard decisions on that. But what would we base it on? Spreadsheets. Yeah, there's some, there's some tangible.
Yeah.
We can't get away with it. Somebody knows what that number is. Yeah. This is what we're gonna have over. How do we split it? That's the question. And then, okay, if we gotta split it, what's the most important thing? Student safety, staff, academic enrichment, everything else is tiered side dishes of a very important pyramid of nutrition. Help us. If we only had X amount of dollars and 80% is going to staff, how are you gonna divide the other 20%? That's the question. Give us something we can approve. And then we all have to go to the public and defend it.
Thank you, sir.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think to some degree, as a board, we are in a little bit more of the philosophical part of it, right?
There's a component of that.
Right, so it is our job to
Yes.
say, these are what the priorities of the board
Right.
are, how are you gonna split the pie?
That's what I'm
Right.
saying. That was my
So
question.
to some degree, we, as much as it sucks, right? That we actually don't, well, it sucks and it would be really helpful, I think, for us to probably have more informed discussion. But at the end of the day, we don't get to say how the pie is split. Right? We approve the budget that they present to us on how the pie is split, but we get to say, these are the priorities from a philosophical standpoint, right? And yes, it could be those three things, but there are so many things that go into those three things, right? Because again, I think about educational instruction. We can't do educational instruction well at all if we don't have stronger language access. Right? And so is that a priority? For me, it is. So, we have to stay a little bit higher.
That's right.
And we can't always get as concrete, particularly around the decisions that are going to be made, as we might like. Which I think is hard, like when I'm an operations person in my work, right? So coming from a business owner mindset, you can use that knowledge, but at the same time, they're the ones that are really determining the pie and the pieces of it.
I think that's the balance. I think I hear Director Charlie say, help me. So I don't think it's a conflict. I think this is our journey. So I think the board prioritizing gives them ammunition. But we've already heard in the other meetings that 80% of our budget goes to staff. So you already know that. There's a collective agreement that's gonna be rebargained, but that ratio is gonna be about the same, am I right? So even then, now you're not even talking about a split, you're talking about 20%, 30% to prioritize how that's split.
Well, and to prioritize where those staff go, right, or how those staff are.
But that's
deployed.
all part of the split. Because depending on what you cut, you're gonna repurpose staff, resources, et cetera. So now so I think us prioritizing gives these talented, gifted people at least what they need to have. They gotta go back and adjust that. I'm glad I don't have to. But our job isn't easy either.
No, it's not.
And so it's not an either or. I just think, I'm new, but I'm not new to this.
Yes.
I'm just new here. This is the challenge. This is the burden of leadership, and everybody ain't cut for it. But we also, I've been in a couple of these meetings, we overcomplicate the stuff too. Don't have to be that complicated. We got a finite amount of money. We've got to use it in the best way, and we're already, I think we got an appointment to get our hands slapped with the, what y'all call it, the binding? That's this, I gave my teenager the allowance and they tricked it off, but they need more money. Right? So this is where we are. I think these priorities are not off, we have changed.
So Amy,
8 to 7.
can you share when we're gonna be presenting some preliminary, I guess spreadsheets for the team? So they know what's coming.
So the projections.
Yeah,
and things of
projections.
that nature. So my goal is to prepare and to present at the next board meeting. Just to projections of where we are going to land the year. We've been working really hard to analyze where we are. You'll see a number of the finding conditions conversation that we're going to have. I don't think it's going to be that high, but we are looking in a range of anywhere between probably 3 to 5.
And I think on our end, we have to recognize that we're not even prioritizing just on carte blanche. It's gonna be through the lens of providing agreement, which impacts that too.
And then we've already gone through, so one of the things I'm hoping we can present at least by the 27th. Because we already have it, but we just are finalizing a few details. I think we're working with current contractors. Is we're gonna list sort of certain programming that we're funding, like that I mentioned before, like for example, the Belong Partners and this and that. And we're gonna share what the plan is, what the reduction is going to be, and then what's gonna replace it, or what are we planning on replacing it with in terms of, for example, after school programming in K-5, like that is something that we've been working on since December. Trying to re-envision what does that look like for us, because right now we have 3 different outside vendors that support that. So that costs money. So we're trying to minimize that and pick one group, and we are partnering with City of Tukwila. We're gonna be looking at Boys and Girls Club to figure out what we can actually offer in summer school, and next year that's actually more cost benefit for our students and also provides free services to our students as well. So those are things we're looking at. And so but you will have that spreadsheet with that information by next session, so that that'll help, because then you'll have something concrete to say, nope, I want this to stay, right? Or something.
But for me, it's just, I don't want to use the word frustrating. It's excessively complicated. Because if 80% of your budget is staff, that's where your cuts should start.
Yeah.
And the biggest cut should be there, because we got union alliances that make that difficult. So now we're
Yeah.
picking up lint out the rug, we can't really afford it back.
Yeah.
Right? So cutting football and band.
Yeah.
That ain't no $3 million cut, but you can cut it and say you cut some stuff and still be deficit. You really got,
But I mean,
so that's the part that I don't have an answer for. It's just,
the not shifting funding for our 7 community liaisons, I mean, that's a significant chunk of money that, again, should certainly be a priority. We gotta find money to be able to fund those positions.
Well, I wouldn't want to be, but they're important, but I'm not sure that you need 7 of them. Because, I mean, I've had conversations with, we've had our community liaisons, their skills vary depending on who our population is. So we have a lot that are, the South Asian folks, and they are getting more independent. And now we have a new set of people, coming in from Angola and so forth. So, I mean, that, I wouldn't want to limit, that's a group that we need, but how it's actually made up, I would like to hear from the experts.
Well, for sure, but I think of it, if our priority is that we have the supports for families who do not speak English, right? Whether that is community liaisons, whether that's increasing other access to language, whatever. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to quantify it by saying all 7 need to stay. And, I mean, I'd probably argue that they're probably still supporting our families, even if.
Well, I don't think there's any question they're supporting, but the question is when you're in a tight budget thing, you have to kind of make, what's the biggest bang for the buck kind of thing.
And that's exactly what we're talking about, right? And getting into the nitty gritty, I would say, again, that is a high priority for me.
and if that cost spelled out on the spreadsheet we're getting.
Yep.
And I don't mean just that, but those breakdown.
Would it be helpful to go through the list and say what type of funding each one of these would provide?
On the
We
budget
have
priorities.
that on our list, though. We have it identified through the program, how they're being funded, what's the amount, and then what's the reduction we're proposing, and then what's
Okay.
the impact.
Okay.
So that's,
Awesome.
yeah,
And that's
I don't
why,
have to do
that would have saved me this last 45 minutes of my brain. If I had that, what I mean, in front of me, so. But what I hear you say is you pick something specific that is important to you, right? That's there, but that was specific, and that's what I'm trying to get to is I don't have. Charlie doesn't have the knowledge of what's important, right? That's gonna be left to the people that are at the school. So that's why I want to hear from, in some form or fashion, email or what is important and needs to come back, so then I can look at that and I can say, oh, Dr. Pedroza, what's this part? And we'll look at the budget and we'll go down there and we'll go that way. So then I can hear, because I know what was important to my kids. I know what's important to my grandkids, but they're not a reflection of all the kids.
Yeah.
That's there. So I want to be sure that the people that are doing it each day. So my priority, there we go, is to support the people that are doing it every day within the budget that we have to get us to a healthy spot so that someday we can offer more services, right, to our youth, but stay within our obligations within the state to serve and best educate them, because, and the goal being after that they graduate, that they're going to go out and be, productive within society, right? Or college, school, whatever that's going to be there. So that's about as best of a philosophy. That's about as philosophical I can get.
But the other philosophical thing for me is also what I call increasing student count, because that's one of the big things that's going to get us to a more stable position. And so what does that mean? Among other things, that means offering a competitive educational program, because we know our students, they can go to Highline, they can go to Renton, they can go to charter schools, they go to private schools. So we need to, it's another dynamic within this balance, this great balancing game that's going on. We need to pay attention to making sure that, because you get students like Dennis and Alex, they aren't getting totally what they want, so they're going to go to Highline College. So how do we think about keeping them. You know, we talked about, you know, college and high school, but these are kind of a little longer term things, but we can't, you know, whatever we start cutting, we can't kind of undermine that, because otherwise it'll take us a long time to try and get that back. I mean, if we start developing a school district that offers, you know, programs that are not competitive at all, then, you know,
Right.
people are gonna go. And so,
And I think at the same time, sitting in the meetings, I realized that we're dealing with many of the students that do actually come to us. English is their second language. So yeah, we have to be competitive in the marketplace for the students that have other choices. We also have to be cognizant of who is actually choosing our school.
Right.
Because if we don't provide for them, we lose them.
right,
And if you're not competitive with Tyee, Highline, or whatever else is close around it. So that gets back to conundrum. Because if a flood of our students, I think we were talking a couple of meetings ago that many of the asylum seeker families are coming to our school. Well, we lose those, what do you call them, community?
Yeah.
How are they gonna get drafted? But yeah, gosh. That's the point. So now, because you can shut all that down and just not be a school district marketing that demographic who's actually coming to you for that need. Then you run the risk of, so I think even in that prioritizing, define who we want to be and whom we are intending to serve may impact some of those choices as well.
yeah, I think we clearly need an emphasis on our MLL students. I mean, they've always, and they are consistently about 40% white students, so, you know, that's a major.
And when I was looking
More
at,
this year, you said?
when I was looking at the numbers, they're the majority of our new students. And if you're projecting out, more of your students are coming with this particular set of needs. Well, yeah, there's an importance to identify the priorities. There's also identity.
Yes.
Who are we as a district and who do we serve? How can we do it well? That shapes it.
So I'm just trying to like get some, at least somewhat tangible things out of our discussions.
Yeah,
So maintaining and increasing supports for multilingual learners and their families.
I don't know that's what I'm saying. I'm saying we gotta decide if that's what you're gonna do. Cause if that's not the district you wanna be, you
I
don't
mean-
keep throwing money at it, or you decide that is who you're gonna be, cause that's who you serve. And you're not worried about competing for the students that don't have those needs. Cause if you're trying to do both, you won't do either well. I shouldn't say do both. You gotta do both, cause you got that kind of, but when you start talking about cuts and prioritize, you gotta.
And I think that's what this,
Yeah.
that's what we're doing right now,
So
right?
don't-
So I
just
think-
don't- No,
You know, it's, that is a piece that's a
Yeah.
part of our strategic
Yeah.
plan. So it aligns with that. I mean, I also think that when we decided to move forward with the dual language program, that became a commitment
yeah, okay.
to the students that we were gonna serve 4 or 5 years ago, right?
So then that
was made.
we've already identified that as a priority.
Correct.
Yes.
And then also thinking about, regardless of whether that's part or not, who is here, right? Who are our students that are here? So, you know, if we're thinking about wanting to serve the students that are present in our district the best, that is likely, as you said, what's about the percentage?
So I'm just looking now, we have 1,307 active multilingual, so that's more than 50% of our students.
So it sounds to me like that should be a priority.
That's who your customers are.
And I'm not sure that's in conflict with, you know, the AP courses.
Right.
Because what we observed is those students that I've observed over the years, they come here, they're some of the most hardworking students, and as soon as they catch on to the language, zoom, they're
Right.
off. And then they're the same ones that are gonna be that are wondering, where's this challenging coursework? I mean, you know, so it's not a conflict.
No, I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
That add on to that 1,307 active, they currently qualify for services. There's other students who exited our program, exited multiple services, who are part of our overall district population as well. And so if you look at students who are multilingual, whether they qualify for extra support services or not, the numbers will be larger than 13. So it's going to be a larger percentage of the students in our community.
That's
Your
done,
point that
for
they-
example.
To your point that they are, they also have dreams and aspirations and want to have. the
Big
resources.
ones.
So maybe not even using MLL, because then that probably puts it in the definition of folks that are in the MLL program, and if we just say our multilingual students a little bit more broadly.
Yes, but could I just say a couple things? Some of them sound the same. Start with Luke and Ellen, who said, how well do you do many things? That's what champions. So the question is, what are your ordinary things? And how can you be excellent at those? The second thing I have to say is schools offer things. I'm in Air Force battle, I've been to a lot of schools, but Kenmore, we knew that they were really good at language. The kids, the parents, when I moved to Cambridge, we knew that they had pretty good language, but they're excellent at that. And we knew that was asset coming out of school. That's high school talk. They go all the way down to the elementary schools, because that's where it was. Washington. But what are your best things? What do you shine at? That's your recruitment tool that you talked about earlier. You should try to preserve those. You can't be best at them. That's the example I just gave you, 2 different schools, 2 different things that you're best at, right? You want to be best at it. Then lastly, what I heard Charlie say, was it's just kind of said it and nobody bounced on it, which was, what's your recovery plan? On things that you do best. Slim back up. How soon can you pull it back up again? I know you're all thinking, oh my God, we're here on this confined condition for 2 years and then we'll be on some kind of crack. And then I guess on the edge of the world where we knew it was round, you're gonna fall off somewhere and we'll never come back. But maybe part of the message to the public is coming up with a strategy to come back in those areas so people can stick down. That's my promise.
Thank
I think when I think about that, right, there's a vision that I think Dr. Pedroza has been laying the groundwork for, right? And that's the vision for what's at the end of this hump that we're on. And so it's there. Is it like, do we have a written out strategy 100% for that? No, and I don't think that that's necessary personally, because I think you've got the vision, right? And you've got a plan, even if it's a year 1 and a year 2 plan for how we are going to move forward and towards that vision.
And where we're running on the assumption that that the strategic plan with some tweaks, we talked about some tweaks at the end, like what do we need to improve? But that the goals, the 4 goal areas that we've been putting out in work sessions are the goals of the district. These are the things we're saying that we are going to strive for, we're either going to improve on, or we're saying this is what we're good at and we're going to improve on that as well. So high expectations for students, right, which includes the growth goals. And I'll just share, so I'll just share preliminary as an example, is we have in their stretch goals and goals that we're a district focused on growth. We spent all morning with our principals looking at all their growth data, right? And I will say, we have students in our middle school, for example, who based on this assessment are on grade 2. But they've already when we did their mid-year assessment, are already at grade 5. That's amazing. That's huge, right? Now, they still show up as red on the big metrics because they're significantly below grade level, but then think about that. Where on earth can you take a child reading at a 2nd grade reading level and get them to 5th grade within 6 months? That's not this is fall assessment, mid-year assessment, right? So what I'm focusing on, we're focusing on growth as a system for all of our students. So the students who are at grade 8, for example, and are at grade 8 or a little bit at grade 9, what is their goal? What is their stretch goal, right? So we are a system focusing on growth for all of our, an accelerated growth. So I will say, the admin team was sitting there going, that's red. And I said, that's 3 years of growth in 6 months. That is amazing. Like, celebrate that. That is huge. And so what I say is that's evidence that what they are working on in support of those multilingual learners, and there's specifically multilingual learner is working in their system. They also had another student who was at grade level, I think it was 4 or 3, I can't remember, and they're already at grade level. Right? And so they're at grade 8. That school did that, right? Showalter did that. So, and we had a lot of that in all of our schools, by the way. And we also had areas where we're like, oh, okay, this is something we need to attend to, right? So that is the promise that we're saying that we're going to be focusing on, right? Because our goal is to get all our students at that high level, right? So they can actually then take college in the high school and dream about going to Emory or being a superintendent, as one person asked me about the other day. So that's the goal, right? And then the empathy and equity and the relationships goals, and then all of those are the things that we're engaged learners. Like, what does that mean to be engaged? So that's what we're hanging our hat on as our, I guess, our focus. But we also recognize that funding other things are foundation to that, right? There's other things that are foundation. So SEL is foundation to some of those things, but that's part of relationship work, right? That's part of engaged learner work, right? That's all connected. So that's how what we're talking about is our priority, but we needed to hear, because and that was board approved. We're working on educating and getting our system in alignment to that. And I think the most important part for us now is, with that, are there other things that we're missing, right? That we need to say are priorities. And so when we heard some of them, because when we're talking now, when it gets down to staffing, right? That's a K-12 goals. But when we say staffing, okay, so where do we need to prioritize our energy? And we also learned some data too today. We learned a couple grade levels are struggling, that we have data to show that. And so I think some of the comments here are alignment to what we need to be doing, right? In the work that we need to be doing. And not just what we're looking at in terms of data and growth. But I want to say that that's what we're holding ourselves accountable. But if there's something else that's missing, we need to know, right? Because, for example, athletics and Avid is not explicit in there, but it's embedded in there somewhere. So we just want to make sure that we're on track. And when we present to you the programs and the staffing, I'd say is coming to them. When is that coming, Erin? Just to remind, so we got the programs and the budget enrollment in February 20. When's staffing coming to them? 27th as well.
Meeting.
Yeah, so we'll have all of that for you. Nice spreadsheet ready to go. So, and then we want to hear from you exactly. So this was helpful for us. We're going to come back and meet and listen to what we've heard, and we'll look and see if we're in alignment. We still have to get the union information, and then we've got the principal information, and then we will present that to you, and then we will, but there are significant reductions. So, and we can explain our rationale and our impacts why, and then we'll hear from you, what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I think you're pretty much in alignment. I think what you're talking about is the next thing. It's what you're looking for, the next more concrete level of things. So.
February 27th. There we go.
I just want to kind of reflecting again a little bit on yesterday. One of the things that Dr. Rogers already said is, you know, we spend our money where our priorities are, right? And you know, yesterday was all about committing to doing anti-racist work and continuing to move us towards an anti-racist district. So I am going to advocate that is also one of our top board priorities, that there is investment in resources and time, particularly knowing that our consultants, that contract is ending.
Yeah.
And so what is that going to mean for continued work? I think that's an important priority that I want to see.
Yes.
Number 2 on the list, although I think we still should the board should put on its list to at some point review our race and equity policy. It's quite old now. Needs to be updated. You know, use more current language. So.
And I would, if I would, just for the record, as we're talking about prioritizing the anti-racist curriculum, we have to move from awareness to empowerment and enforcement. Doesn't matter. You do all this awareness, spend all this money around awareness. You don't put those things in place and hold our professionals accountable to it. It wasn't a good use of your money. It won't change the culture. And we have to, I think we need to consider that moving forward. Even if it's in the budget, even if it's in, from your office down to the principals. Just walk in the halls of our schools and hear it. And past principal asked me, what should we do? I said, give me your personnel man. Hey, you got all the stuff in there. You just didn't apply it here. And that's why the culture won't change. So I think that's important. I'm sorry, point. I think that's important.
I think it is important. That's what the equity leads and the principals said yesterday when we met with them. The thing that they said that Tukwila School District suffers from is a one and done approach. So one training next, one training next, and there's no revisiting, bringing back or accountability to double check to make sure that that's happening. And we
And
actually.
it opens it up for lawsuits.
Right, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
civil rights.
Yeah.
So
this is that this is that, right,
Yeah,
yeah, this is that
that's
opportunity.
what costs you more.
So exactly what you said about the accountability, this is the opportunity, instead of bringing on new things, doing the things that are working.
So I'm speaking to that as to, you see it if there's, or the last one, 2 or 3. But I think that doesn't necessarily need a whole new budget line item money. But if we don't put teeth to what's in place, you open we're still talking about budget, you open yourself up, we open ourselves up to a bigger cost. Because you have it in place.
Yeah, number 2, it says, and it's a fabric of who we are.
Yeah.
That's the part of it. And, you
Then we
know,
become negative.
another thing that came up in, this is from an old study of Twisted in its district, but one of the things that was lacking was the procedures that, and I know you're working on that whole thing, the procedures, how you enforce all that stuff. Gets to the kind of one and done. No, it needs to sink all the way down. So it becomes part of the culture of the district, not just the training that they did with that.
And I also think that I hope that that's something that is being held really closely at the bargaining table as well, as much as possible by both parties.
I would say it was great because last night we actually had key bargaining team members on the team meeting last night who were at least affirming in that space that there's conversations that need to happen among them in terms of racial equity. So that was positive for me to hear, see that. Right.
We've got at least a few things, and if nothing else, hopefully there were some things that you were able to take away from our conversation to really continue the work that y'all need to do.
Took notes.
Anything else, kind of on this piece, before we shift gears just a little bit?
I don't know whether I can share this another time, but one of the, I guess it's related, it's like, one of the questions that comes up a lot is, how did we get here and how do we prevent this from getting here again?
Yeah.
I mean, Dr. Groza said she gets that a lot when she goes out and talks to people. And I've been thinking about that a lot as well. And I don't know, I mean, I could just put them out quickly and if you want me to talk about more, I can, but in terms of preventing, one of the things, the first thing is we need, timely and accurate budget information to the board. I mean, there's a whole thing about, and I know that's working on the ESD, is working on that as well, because I don't think we got early enough information about that to really act on it. The second thing is we clearly need a progressive state funding system, which we've been working on for a few years. We need to figure out how to kind of increase our student count. That will help us get out of this, because school districts are pretty easy to manage when you have a steadily increasing, which we did for many years, and then the last 5 or 6 it's been down. And then the other big one is, getting more effective and efficient. And that's what Dr. Rhodes and the staff, all you guys are working on, examining all of our systems to figure out how to get more bang for the buck out of this.
Yeah, the two things in our control are the timely, accurate budget
Yes.
reporting. And then this, we're not necessarily with the student count, but the internal controls is what we call them, is what we're doing the analysis on.
Right.
The other thing we're doing is we're trying to publish those with everybody.
Right.
Because, you have it's kind of like a web, right? You have the schools, the office manager, they have their budgets. And so when those things aren't, so the one thing that Amy's gonna work on is drafting some budget procedures that are really clear for everybody. So what are school budgeting procedures? What are district budgeting procedures? That's something that they're gonna be working on. Same with, for example, IEP, right? What does that mean for safe special ed, for safety net? So they're gonna be working on procedures. So we have the processes in place, and then we have an internal system and guidance document that we can refer to that's compliance oriented, and that hopefully, but it's gonna take a while, because even when we laid out controls, old habits, right? So we have some old habits that we have to rein in and think through, and I've told people when I've gone to schools is, I've said, the internal controls aren't temporary. So they're permanent. So we have to act like they're permanent, and we have to be disciplined, right? It's like when you give your allowance, to your child, right? If they spend on that, then you have to rein that in and go, okay, let's review, like, this is what we have to do again. So we have to keep doing that and reminding people, and there has to be accountability. We've had these conversations, for example, when a school just assumed that approved something without checking, and then we're like, okay, are you funding that? And they're like, oh, wait a minute, right? So just making sure that we put these procedures in place and these systems in place. And then the last thing we're doing is we're, sorry about that, this is just Tukwila School District. So whatever you're telling me about early release, maybe, I don't know, so that's funny. That's perfect. But the last thing I was gonna say is, so that's the part we're working on, the internal controls, the procedures. But the other thing we learned is previously, a lot of people were negotiating contracts and negotiating things. And so that actually now, we've minimized that, and only 2 people in this entire district are the final approvers of any contract, and that is Amy Fleming and Nancy Bidwitz. That's it. Nobody else can sign any contracts right now. They're all going through, and I'm the last signer. So they go through CFO first, making sure we have the budgeted line item, and then to me as the final approver. So that's hard too, because we had a lot of people that were signing contracts or approving contracts or working on things. And so those are things that we've had, and that's new discipline that we have to do as well. And invoicing, all of those pieces. So we're working on our internal systems. And what they have to let everyone know, this isn't a temporary measure. This is the way we're going to operate if we're going to stay fiscally solvent and think forward. So those are things that I can let you know that we are doing, and it's not been easy. It's been a challenge, but I will say it's actually good learning, and we're learning what we need to keep doing because it's people, right? People. They have, they 21 times to make a habit, and you have it. So hopefully it's not that long, but.
I think, one of the big messages they came out of this is, we aren't gonna be able to do business as usual.
No.
That's in all aspects of this organization.
Yeah.
Not doing that.
Not doing that. And it's gonna be okay. It's fine.
Oh, I think, observing kind of organizations, a lot of organizations need to go through these kind of internal examinations, consolidating from time to time, because if they don't, everything gets.
Yeah.
So, I'm convinced that we'll come out of this
We will.
stronger as an organization.
Yeah, I'm convinced too.
I also want to be, just thinking about the prevention things, I want to be careful about using increasing enrollment as a preventative tool, because obviously there are probably little things that we can do to mitigate, the few students that might choose to go to a different district for whatever reason. Certainly, we can think about that, but the reality is like birth rates are down significantly. People my age and younger like are having kids much later, if at all. And so I think we really need to be thinking about what prevention and sustainability looks like with continued stagnant and even declined enrollment. So then how we put controls in for when enrollment decreases, because that is probably unfortunately the reality. Not only is it birth rates, but also like people are really thinking about alternative ways of educating their kids, whether that be homeschooling, online learning, community learning, whatever that is, but it's certainly not. Public education is unfortunately, I think, moving away from kind of like just the go-to standard. So anyway, I think I want to just be mindful about us thinking about that as a preventative tool for our budget, because I don't know.
But I
that
think
we'll
we can
be
do both. We
5,
could
10 years
also
from now.
try and make our system as competitive as possible.
We should.
Yeah. Okay, so let's shift now to the resolution. So this is resolution 945 for review. And remind me, this is the one that we're getting to, sort of having another one at 5:15. Is this the review of that resolution that we're voting on at 5:15? Two separate things. Okay,
It's separate.
great.
It's just an intro.
This is, okay, the first read of the resolution. So this is the one that was suggested that the board consider as essentially a way of empowering the superintendent to make the decisions that need to be made around the budget. There was one, I think, addition that was requested that got added. And
Did it?
what was that?
So the third whereas that was added to the request.
It's the third one, Director Larson.
The state's funding system is regressive and
Regressive.
provide less per student funding to districts serving more students from qualified families.
Okay, yeah.
So the plan for this resolution, so we don't even have to we're not making final decisions about this tonight. It was to have a little bit of discussion if needed right now, and then we will likely put it on action for the February 27th meeting.
I assume this is kind of required by OSBI as part of going into.
And it's
planning
also,
conditions.
yeah, it's suggest how they suggested. It's something that Greg worked on prior to leaving with
Oh, okay.
collaboration. And other districts have done it as well, when they especially have substantial budget to kind of authorize and allow basically the superintendent of the district administration to do what's necessary to
Yeah.
to stabilize the system over the next few years.
Yep.
Charter declaration, like, yes, let's do this.
Make it clear.
Make it clear.
Yeah.
So the dates, I think, would need to change. Because they're on number 2 at the bottom, it says fiscal stabilization plan for review with the board on February 13th, board meeting.
Does that mean to change to the 27th?
Yep, probably. Yeah, we would change that. That's why this is a draft. Yeah. Yeah. So that.
Any questions about what something might mean, unintended impacts or outcomes?
We're not voting on this now.
You're not, we're just chatting about it.
I looked at it.
Okay.
I was concerned about the date, because
Yeah, you're like that date is, that's great, that's smart.
I just missed.
Can't be perfect all the time. Okay, well, if,
I guess at
Oh,
this point, I was thinking,
And I think this is a good time if you wanna strike something too, right? Right, so if you wanna
no,
strike.
I mean, this is good, it's just, I guess my only comment about, in terms of the budget, you know, we're gonna see a budget, later this year, is that so, having seen lots of budgets for the years that have predicted kind of tighter fund balances at the end of the year, all predating the new year. And then at the end of the year, seeing that, we've got fund balances well above. And I've had lots of discussions with past CFOs about this, but we really need something that's as accurate as possible. I understand that, there are variations in how the state gives us money in different times and so forth, but in order for us to do a good job of this, this one's really gonna need to be pretty close to accurate, because we're gonna be under some kind of legal obligation to get down to a zero fund balance by April 25 and 4% fund balance by the following year. So, we're gonna really, need some accurate numbers. More accurate than we've had in the past.
so it kind of states in all the different whereases. All these different reasons, I assume kind of like why when this would naming the fact that we are in binding conditions be useful to add there?
We could add that.
Okay.
If you have a suggestion in which bullet area?
Where?
Yeah.
That's as far as I got.
You can say it in the title,
I
maybe.
know when I was looking at it, I noticed I didn't see binding conditions, but I could hear it implied already in there.
Yeah, yeah.
So it may not be necessary, but that was just my first times I read it.
You could reference resolution 944,
Which is the one we're gonna be voting on in the next.
which officially puts us into.
I think some connection would be nice, because again, if this is all about communicating via resolution, why we are giving the authority of this nature. And so I think having all of the really specific reasons why would be useful. So yeah, either referencing that resolution, that would be just fine.
Okay, great, yeah. I think that'd be important, assuming it passes. I know.
What would happen if we didn't pass it? Like,
I know, what
can't even-
happened? I have no idea.
Justin would come up.
Yeah.
Justin would come with that. Actually, we're in his building, so he could come up here right
Not
now.
ask the question.
Yeah, don't ask the question. Yeah. That's funny. Okay,
If anything comes up between now and the February 27th meeting related to this resolution, just let myself, Deb, and Concy know. And we'll make sure it gets added. We'll look at it one more time, and then vote on it at that meeting. Okay, we have 11 minutes left and 30 seconds. Is there anything else kind of just, last final statements? I mean, obviously it's not gonna be the last time we talk about the budget or our priorities in connection to the budget, but is there anything that folks just wanna make sure is named as the,
So are we leaving, so it sounded like on the discussion, this budget philosophy document they had is more or less intact. And that's what we're going forward. And then the budget priorities document that we had, we're kind of just leaving that hanging out there.
I think so,
as
yeah.
Somewhat irrelevant until, well, it sounds like Charlie and that's Roger probably maybe want to review that after
Yeah.
the more concrete things come in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I still think it'd be useful for y'all to have a document with our board priorities that it's formalized and we vote on and such. there are at least kind of these two that I had outlined, or three rather, that I outlined kind of during our discussion. So I'll put those in writing as kind of a start of our next draft. And then we can have some more discussion at probably one of our upcoming meetings after the 27th. That way we have the time to really digest what we're given, and then have some continue meaningful discussion about.
Director Larson, you involved with the forming of the Olympus Club?
Yes.
And you were actually at the community meetings, correct? There was a few people in attendance, but you were there as well, right? Because it's required to have the budget priorities go out into. community.
Yeah, every year. Yeah, I've done several of them.
And did you,
Actually, one of them, we were at the chair.
that's right, I was there.
Veronica, you and I had a
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah, we did that in the car.
Yeah.
But the information that Charlie and I are waiting on,
Yeah,
you already had that from that term, that session, in manufacturing the last list. You will
I
have,
wouldn't, the document that they're coming out with, I think is gonna be much more detailed than anything we've had before.
Okay.
I think, and hopefully more, the documents that we've had before have tended to be more accounting oriented.
yeah,
And I think these are gonna be more programmatic oriented, which
Okay.
I think is a big improvement and
Right.
should make it easier for you guys.
I was just asking because
Yeah.
it'll show the way in which we review it. Because you were there and we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but if there's some things, the nuances, you want to look at different or whatever.
Well, I think, like I say, this old one is it's based on old information, so I think it's best to start with the new information.
Okay.
And while I wasn't here for the original creation of them, we updated them last year. And I feel like I didn't have much more information than I have today. So,
So
just
that
kind
would-
of, yeah,
I will say that, this document has been traditionally included in the formal budget document. And when community members looked at that, this was the only thing they could kind of relate to, because the rest of the document is all accounting codes and stuff, which is. So hopefully, and, that's hopefully part of the budget process. We'll be able to present something, and hopefully we'll see other things that we can actually put out into the community, and they'll be able to relate to it in some way. And then we could have those discussions as we go to the budget approval through June, July.
Because I think it's important that people know, for example, what's being eliminated versus what's being reduced, and then what is
Right.
replacing it, or what are we doing differently, right? Or how are we using that service differently? Because I think that will actually that'll help with transparency. I think it'll help with people understanding, okay, good, it's not going away, or they're just, doing this, we're gonna have professional development still, we're still gonna be working with them. Or understanding why something's going away, if it is going away, that we have data to show this, or we have information that shows, or we can, based on feedback from the principals and the teachers, this is why we're eliminating.
Yeah, this round of budget is gonna be by far undoubtedly more controversial than anything we've ever done. Just because it's cutting into the-
Yes.
So we're gonna need a good solid document that explains the, not in terms of accounting codes, but in terms of program facts, that here's what's going on.
We have some marching groups. Some. Okay.
all right, we'll move to adjourn this work session, 4:53.
So we-
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
all opposed can stay.
Oh, yes, anyway, so we reconvene again, because we can't do it early because it's posted, so it has to be 5:15. Okay, so we reconvene at 5:15. We're looking at one resolution, voting on that resolution. We'll hopefully be out of here in 15 minutes, so by 5:30.
You just jinxed us.